Ladies and gentlemen, welcome you again to this conference titled Extractives and Beyond, Responding to Energy Transitions and Their Impact on Petroleum Investments in Africa. This is a conference organized by the Extractives Hub and the African Energy and Minerals Management Initiative under the partnership of the Center for Energy, Petroleum and Mineral Law and Policy of the University of Dundee, which is under the directorship of Professor Peter Cameron, together with the Extractives Hub, which we'll have information on in just a bit. And at this moment, permit me, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome Dr. Victoria Nalule to give us opening remarks and more about the Extractives Hub and the research being conducted there. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Joel. And thank you very much to all our panelists and participants. Thank you for coming in big numbers. And today's conference, as Joel has mentioned, we're focusing on extractives and beyond. Specifically, we want to respond to the impact of energy transitions on petroleum investments in Africa. So the issue of energy transitions is a global issue, and it has attracted a lot of attention from different countries, international organizations, and regional organizations. But the purpose of this conference is for us to redefine energy transitions in the African perspective. How is this move going to affect African countries? Are the countries ready to move to a low carbon economy? What are the challenges these countries are likely to face? So at the Extractive Hub, I do lead the research on energy transitions, and our focus is on the indicators, transition indicators, and also we want to come up with guidelines that can be able to help African policymakers. So that's the part on the Extractive Hub. And then with the African Energy and Minerals Management Initiative, an NGO I'm leading as the executive director. We have also conducted research, and today at the end of the conference, we'll be able to launch our first book on energy transitions, where you'll be able to hear from different contributors who are from different countries, and they're experts in this subject. So this is a very important conference for us because we have conducted the research, we have had opinions of policymakers, and we have had opinions of experts, and we believe it's time for us to be able to address the issue of energy transitions in Africa. So with those few remarks, I would like to invite Professor Peter Cameron, who is the director of the Center for Energy, Petroleum, Mineral and Policy at the University of Dundee, and he is also the team leader and principal investigator for the Extractives Hub project. Thank you very much. Peter Cameron, I do invite you.
Thank you, Victoria. Well, good morning, Your Excellency. Good morning, distinguished participants. Thank you, especially to my fellow organizers for the outstanding work that you've made possible. It's a great program of events that we have this morning and into the afternoon. And I think it shows you two things. One, it shows that when human beings face adversity and challenges, they rise to them and they do great things. And this is one of the things, one of the positive responses to a context that is unfortunate and is beyond our control. And I think the other thing is that whenever you put Africa on the agenda as the subject matter, people think that it's worthwhile attending the meeting. There's a lot of enthusiasm. So my background, as Victoria pointed out, is in education. Therefore, I suppose you could say I'm a professional optimist about people and events and about the future. If I weren't an optimist, then I don't think I could do my job. I'm also the head of a project called the Extractives Hub, which is funded by the British government, the Department for International Development. And in addition to that, so in my private capacity, I sit as an international arbitrator. So I'm aware of disputes and things like that go on. I hope that everybody here is going to find today's event, virtual event, stimulating, exciting. And I hope we're going to get some new insights out of it into what's going on, especially about energy transition in Africa. We've heard so much about it in other contexts. Let's hear now about the African dimension to all this. And I look forward also to participating in the discussions a little bit later in the panel that deals with investment, which is a crucial part of the whole energy transitions jigsaw puzzle. And so, Victoria, with those few introductory remarks, I just say once again, thank you so much for all this fantastic work that you and your team have done to make this event possible. And I'm really looking forward to learning from the event. Thank you very much.
We would have Mr. Robert Kasande to give us the opening remarks. Mr. Robert Kasande is one of our guest speakers and is the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development in Uganda. And he's going to be talking about energy transitions in an African perspective, the continued role of fossil fuels and related challenges. Mr. Robert Kasande, you're most welcome to give us your remarks.
Thank you very much, moderator. From my kind of area, it's good afternoon. But many of you, I know it's good morning. But I hope you are all well and keeping safe. Like you heard, I'm the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. So I look at energy transition, I look at oil and gas from a helicopter view, if you like, because I have to mix how we proceed with the resources that we have discovered, oil and gas resources, but also with without forgetting that the transition will come at one time. Let me put some facts to you that will become relevant when we discuss the transition later on. Uganda has found 6.0 billion barrels of oil, that's stock tank oil in place, of which about 1.4 billion barrels will be recovered. But also the country is a net importer of petroleum products, equivalent to 38,000 barrels of products per day, translating to about $2 billion per year. The East African region, of which Uganda is part, consumes about 220,000 barrels of products per day, that translates $11.6 billion per year. Also, the East African community has not had a refinery of its own in this whole region since 2014, when the Mombasa refinery in Kenya closed. You would agree with me that this presents a huge opportunity for any inland refinery that is built in this region. And therefore, plans are underway for Uganda to use part of its petroleum to build a refinery. Where are we at in terms of developing these products? We intend, when we start to produce, we'll produce about 230,000 barrels of crude oil per day. That is when we are at plateau production, of which 60,000 barrels of this will go into a refinery, inland refinery, and the balance will be in a heated pipeline from Hoima in the oil fields to Tanga Port in Tanzania, a distance of about 1,443 kilometers. The licensed oil companies that we have here in Uganda, that includes Total and Sinuk, but also previously Talo, which has since farmed out of all its licenses in Uganda, these joint venture partners, have been planning and completing studies for the development of these resources. The above studies include front-end engineering design, which we commonly call FEED, environmental social impact assessment, the settlement action planning for land acquisition that is required for all the infrastructure and facilities that will be put in place. And we have also been negotiating commercial and legal agreements that we hope to culminate into signing and taking what we call final investment decision. Once this is taken, we expect the development phase to start in earnest. This will, of course, involve construction of infrastructure like well pads, central processing facilities, in-field pipelines, and the East African crude oil pipeline that will take the crude oil to the coast. The expected spend on these facilities and infrastructure that I've just talked about is somewhere between $10 to $15 billion. That development phase is going to be very critical in terms of economic recovery. Economic recovery, why? Because like everybody in the world, is a clear downturn in terms of economic development occasioned by the COVID-19. However, for us, we saw when we were doing exploration and appraisal of this field, that part of this spend will be left in country. It will be to local companies. At that time, the spend during exploration was about $3.5 billion, of which 28%, which is about $1 billion, went into the local companies' pockets. And it was a game changer. You could see visibly that local companies were advancing in terms of building capacities for their companies. Things like real estate, you could hardly find a free apartment to rent or a hotel. Now, going into the spend of the development phase that will be about 10 to 15, if we looked at the upper limit of $15 billion, we expect that at least 30% of this spend will be on local companies. And that translates to about $4.5 billion. That's quite substantial in economies like ours. And therefore, we think that as I come to look at the impact on COVID-19, we think that COVID-19 has had impact globally, yes, but I think it varies from sector to sector. It has also varied from country to country, how the impact, the strength of the impact. For instance, in Uganda, the impact in the oil and gas sector has had more impact on the downstream end of the value chain. We have seen, of course, our daily consumption of petroleum products plummet from 6 million liters every day to about 2 million liters per day. This is because of the lockdown, obviously. Air traffic is not coming in, vehicles are not moving. And in our revenue services, petroleum product tax is the easiest to collect, and that drop in consumption has been felt. So we have had reduced tax revenues. Of course, the company earnings have reduced. But I'm of the view that as soon as these lockdowns start to ease, eventually the impact of COVID-19 on our sector will start to correct itself in terms of the consumptions coming back up, and therefore the tax revenues being realized. From the upstream perspective, again, the impact by COVID-19 has not been that significant because we are already anyways in a low ebb in terms of activities in the upstream. This means that we have been mostly undertaking negotiations, which most of them have continued even during the lockdown. by video conferencing. But I've also seen that the low oil prices that have been occasioned by not only the COVID-19, but also maybe because of the glut in consumption that was occasioned by Saudi Arabia and Russia. Some companies have taken advantage of this, been an opportunity where transactions have taken place. For instance, here in Uganda, Total was able to buy out all the assets of Tallow. Tallow farmed out, and this was at a lower price than it should have been 2 years ago when this transaction was first floated. So there has been opportunities in the sector, visibly here in Uganda, when we saw this transaction. That transaction has been able to be concluded, and it has helped us put momentum in the negotiations that we have been having. So I think that has been a good thing. Like I mentioned earlier, we are at development planning. For the refinery, we are at the front-end engineering design stage. And we think that for projects that are this mature, even energy transition may not impact on them. I think they will go on to full development and production, especially when a project has been assessed and is commercially viable. Break-even oil price makes sense. In our case, it is around $35 per barrel. So I see ourselves continuing developing the industry, going into production, maybe for the next 20 years, develop a refinery, supply this region that is hungry for product. Logistically, it's a nightmare to bring products inland East Africa. It goes through many, many hurdles, and we think that there is a captive market for us to justify this refinery development. Where I see a challenge is for frontier basins. Unless for some reason or other, there is a significant rise in oil price in the next 10 years, then those frontier basins may have a challenge attracting capital. Nonetheless, as a country, we continue to do exploration in these frontier basins because, first of all, they're in a region that is quite prolific. They are in a region where there has been proven resources in the neighborhood. So all is being done that we develop these assets. However, we are not cognizant. We are cognizant of the fact that the energy transition will happen one day, whether it's 2040 for a case in Uganda or a little bit later. And therefore, we continue as a country to harness our renewable resources. We have quite a bit of renewable resources in terms of hydropower. The Nile has a number of cascading dams that we've built and those that are in planning. I think we could have a whole total potential on the Nile of hydropower of about 3,500 megawatts. Currently, by the end of this year, we'll be producing 2,000 megawatts from that resource. We also have some geothermal resources, and we are currently doing temperature gradient wells that will give us a conceptual model of what these resources have. I think we can produce another 450 megawatts of renewable energy from geothermal resources. You all know that we lie along the equator. Solar resources can be improved, can be harnessed, especially when storage becomes affordable, more affordable than it is today. So a lot of studies are being done in terms of solar and wind power planning. We also have long-term planning for nuclear power, and we have a very clear roadmap on developing our nuclear potential. We have uranium resources. We are working with some countries that have been there and have seen what it takes to develop nuclear power, helping us to develop our potential. We started by training. We have a sizable number of engineers who have gone to very good universities to understand nuclear power development. We are also, as a ministry, working with the ministry responsible for environment, to try and popularize, among others, alternative sources for energy, for cooking, like LPG that will come out of our refinery, but also sensitize the population to use energy efficient stoves, because we are currently using a lot of biomass for cooking. So the best we can do is to try and get alternative sources, and this we're doing as much as possible to sensitize the people. I don't know how much longer I have, but in conclusion, the oil and gas sector in Uganda has reached the development phase for a resource that is well proven, that is commercially viable, and we see ourselves also taking advantage at this time round of the low oil prices, get EPC contracts on the low in terms of pricing. I think this is an opportunity that if we took FID later this year, then the contracting for EPC will come in low. That will help again to lower the break-even oil price. The impact of renewables in this part of the world, where transportation fuels and is all imported, we don't see that impact being felt, not at least in the next 2 decades. When these resources are coming from the region, we'll continue to depend on fossil fuels. But we are also cognizant of the fact that at one time we will also transition from fossil fuels to renewables. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robert Kasande, for these insightful remarks on the current status of the energy sector in Uganda. It was on the point, and trust me, you have quite a lot of questions coming in from the audience, but we'll give them an opportunity at the end of this session to pose these questions to you.